found white fluid on my shirt when I got back from my business trip. Now I am divorced. So my husband, Tony Washington, male 35, and I, female 33, met at a mutual friend's wedding. Well, more like at my cousin's wedding. He was a friend of my cousin's husband. We were sitting at the same table. He was and still is a very handsome, clean, and sophisticated gentleman. I remember on the day we met, I had worn a very long dress, so it somehow tripped me and I almost fell. Imagine falling in front of all the people that were in that hall. It would have been such a bummer and embarrassing. So Tony luckily caught me beforehand since I was trying to stand when I tripped, and he was sitting next to me. His touch gave me goosebumps that I didn't even know I had. Not to mention his soft hands. It felt so right when they touched me. Even his gentle gesture was something else. What I felt for Tony was what I can call love at first sight. He didn't try much or said many words, but his gentleness and handsomeness drew me to him. During that day, we were talking and laughing. It was really nice to be with him. He was in good company. He made me forget about anything else. It felt like nothing was existing except for him and I. I even forgot that we were at my cousin's wedding. I had found a friend and also a lover there. I thought I had found the one my soul needed. He was my true answered prayers. I love a man who knows what they want and makes every effort to get it. Mind you, at that time I had a plan of starting my own internet cafe and coffee shop. And with Tony's knowledge and skills in IT, I knew I had gained resources to help me start a successful internet cafe. It seemed like it was a blessing in disguise, you know. It felt like with Tony by my side, I would have everything figured out, and it would be successful with his intelligence on board. Since then we became friends. He taught me a lot about IT that I didn't know. Well, I wanted to start an internet cafe because we didn't have one in Sicily and big cities, which was far from where I was staying. So I wanted to help my community get easy access to the internet without even having to go to the big city for it. I made it specifically for students so that they can have easy access to the internet and be able to find school projects information in it without having to waste more money to get to the big city to get it. Tony helped me start the internet cafe, which was very sweet and generous of him. I was glad for the service that he had delivered. He started being a computer tutor. Each and every minute that I would spend with him was always priceless. I still melted in his touch and his voice. It had that kind of thing that makes you feel like you have been given some voodoo, or he uses voodoo to make my heart palpitate. Months later, Tony declared his love for me. Well, I had already felt something for him and I was falling pretty hard for him, but I couldn't tell him. I was protecting my heart from being rejected and my ego and pride. He told me how much he enjoys spending time with me and thanked the opportunity that I had given of trusting him with my community children and students. Well, Tony was not from Sicily. He had first come for the wedding, which was the first day that we had first met. So Tony and I dated for 2 years. We were still in the phase of knowing each other very well before we tied the knot. It was the best option, and it gave us time to learn more about each other. I was happy with the fact that Tony was not rushing to any marriage. Yes, we were committed to each other. Well, Tony was residing in Agrigento in the southern coast of Sicily, while my home was in Piazza Armerina, which was about 1 hour and some minutes drive apart. So he would go home for like a week, then come to see me whenever he was free, or I would go to his city when I was not busy. Our love was like a flower. It kept blossoming every minute that we would spend with each other or when we were communicating. Months later, well, we had gotten 2 years of dating, so we got married on the day of our dating anniversary. You know, it's really nice and fulfilling having to spend the rest of your life with your favorite person who is also your partner. We got to share all our flaws, our dreams, our future, and plans. After getting married, we moved to Cefalu, where we wanted to start our own family. We were living the dream, and I couldn't be much happier. I mean, why wouldn't you be happy when you have been given a chance to spend the rest of your life with someone who you fell in love with on the first day that you saw him? I fell in love with Tony the day we had first met. Deep down, I knew that he was my soulmate and my caregiver. He didn't have to try hard to make me happy and feel complete. He knew how to make me feel better during my dull days. He always knew how to put a smile on my face. But you know, when I was to be asked why I cheated or dated a stranger from another country while I had the best thing in my life, I don't know how I would answer that question because I have no response for it. As time passed, cafe restaurants expanded. I ended up opening other restaurants in different cities and 2 outside the country, with Tony's help, of course. That man helped me a lot to the point that he would go as far as missing his business meetings whenever I was going to buy a certain building for the restaurant. You know, when you have something good going on but never get enough of that thing, so you go outside and seek something much better than what you have or getting. It's called greed. I got greedy and allowed my desires to lead me astray. I ended up making bad decisions. So one day, Tony started getting too busy to spend time with me. I know we were both busy, but since I was an entrepreneur, I had so much time to spend by myself. Yes, the intimate moments were still fine, but I needed his attention, and I wanted to spend more time with him. I mean, we had stayed far away from each other for almost 2 years when we were still dating. Ever since we got married, we had spent a couple of times together. We would go out, eat out, or go to play games. My relationship or my marriage with Tony was somehow great because we would always allow ourselves to be young again. Playing games, going out on ice cream dates, attending exhibitions together, we were stress-free and carefree. It was like we were in our very own dimension, living with our rules. Later that day, he respected my request to be back home before dawn and came back home earlier. During dinner, we ate over light conversation, but one would see that there was a huge change between us. The conversations were no longer flowing. It was like we were forcing it. As one of us didn't know how to carry on with the conversation and my heart was so heavy because of his behavior, so I decided to just tell him about the things that he had been doing and how much they were hurting me. But before I told him that, I had reminded him of our 3rd-year anniversary, and I had to take a trip to Dubai to check on the restaurant in 2 days, which took him by surprise. We talked a lot and ironed things out. I had hoped that he would change, you know. I thought he would see his mistakes and rectify them, but instead the man of the house decided to overdo everything that he was doing. Our conversation that we had looked like it had never happened, and everything I had said went from one ear to another ear. I won't lie and say I got used to it because it was sickening and heartbreaking. My conscience would tell me that maybe he was cheating on me, or he had found someone else who was better than me. That was why he was no longer coming home often. Tony was taking the fact that I loved him for granted. He took my love for a ride, and as a good wife that I was, I would understand his behavior. I have understood and tried to come to terms with it and made peace, but it was really hard. It was hard to the point that I would sometimes cry myself to sleep whenever I would think about what was happening in my marriage. Sometimes I would just go to my grandparents' house to cool my head. The tension and everything was too much for me. My sister had suggested that she would move in with me for some time until things got back to normal between my husband and me. Things didn't go the way we had thought. Instead, he came back home regularly, but he would always complain about being tired when I tried to initiate intimacy. Tony was no longer the man that I had fallen in love with, and it was breaking my heart because I loved him, but I was getting bored of always tolerating the old man's childish behavior. I am also a human being. I am a woman. I have a high intimate drive, but he wasn't paying any attention to any of that. Even when I tried by wearing some sexy number to bring back the spark in our relationship, but it wasn't there. He wasn't there. He was always tired or complaining about having a lot of work to do. He forgot that I have desires, which is something that I had told him when we were still dating, that I have a high sex drive, and I love being intimate with my partner at least 3 or 4 times a week. It's a good thing that I had told him, right? He promised me to always deliver, but he never kept his promise. So one sunny Saturday, Tony had left the house to buy meat. He had asked me to prepare something since his friends were coming over to celebrate his other friend's arrival in Italy. I have heard that he was residing in Los Angeles, LA, but now he had relocated to this side. So I prepared everything, and Tony's other friends started coming with their partners because everyone was having a good time up until the man of the day arrived. Mind you, that time I still had to prepare for the business trip. Well, more like it was a trip to check on my restaurant business that was abroad and to meet up with the sponsor. You know, I had told my husband about my trip, but surely that day I saw that he had forgotten about it or he was just avoiding it. During that braai, I asked to speak to my husband on the side, when we were in a quiet place, which is our matrimonial bedroom. I reminded him about my trip, and guess what he said? He just told me that he still remembers, but he doesn't see the need for me to go while we had guests. He even had the nerve to ask me who would take care of the guests if I were to go on the busy day. I couldn't believe my ears, you know. I was so angry at him, but mostly at myself. I somehow regretted even getting into marriage. So I had rescheduled my meetings and my plane to the following day, but the meetings would take place on the day after. My husband didn't even apologize about his behavior and was insensitive when it came to my business. He preferred me to lose a sponsor than to leave his stupid braai and friends. That person who told me that was not my husband, well, it wasn't the husband that I had thought I knew. I didn't even bother addressing the issue because it was going to cause a lot of noise and chaos. So I decided to deal with it when I came back from my trip. So the next day I went to the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, where I would be meeting the sponsor and where I had opened my restaurant. I really love Dubai for my business because besides the fact that it was a tax-free country, but it has so many business opportunities. Some look at it as a good country for vacations and tours, while some, including myself, saw it as a country with great business opportunities. It was beautiful for vacations and tours, yes, but people don't see the kind of opportunities that are in Dubai and UAE as a whole. Anyway, when I got there, I checked on my restaurant and I was impressed with the work my employers were doing, and it was quite busy when I got there, which was a bonus for me. The following day, I went to meet with the sponsor. Of course, we were meeting in my restaurant. As I was going through some paperwork, you know when someone says, "I feel like I'm looking at Jesus himself"? Well, that was what I felt. His body structure, cleanly trimmed mustache, his sexy hazel blue eyes. I was taken aback by the guy. He was really handsome. You know, the kind of handsome Leonardo DiCaprio. That was how he looked. His eyes looked naughty though, and I love being naughty. The guy was not what I had actually expected to be my sponsor. The guy was introduced as Bernard Thurston, male 33. His appearance was charming and mind-blowing. You know when you see someone for the first time and automatically feel attracted to them. That was how I felt with Bernard. I was not attracted to him because of his handsomeness only, but I would sometimes imagine myself being intimate with him. I imagined myself and him riding and grinding each other. My imaginations went wild to a point that I would see him exploring my whole body, his pinkish, sexy lips kissing every fiber of my body. I know it was wrong of me to drool and think like that for my restaurant's sponsor, but I couldn't help it. I mean, the guy was everything and more. I just wanted or craved for only one night with him. Then it would have been enough for me. I am a witch and a loose cannon, I know. But how was I supposed to stop my mind and desire to think about the poor guy? Mind you, that time he was going to be staying with us for some time up until he gets his own place to stay. So imagine the torture and pressure that I would be feeling. I know it's sinister to have these kinds of thoughts for my sponsor, and I was supposed to keep it professional, but I couldn't help it. Only one night with him was going to solve everything. As much as I love my handsome, smart husband, Bernard was the type of guy that you can only have a crush on and date because he was too extreme. His handsomeness, the way he was speaking, would make any woman drop their panties for him. 1 week later, I was still in Dubai and I was actually staying with Bernard. Well, most of the time I was with him since he had offered to take me on a tour around the UAE. He is a very cool guy, carefree, talkative, and funny. He easily adjusted to the new environment and it was going well for him. I had seen him doing workouts a few times in the morning. His abs were something else. I felt like I would touch them. I had so many dirty thoughts for the poor guy, and I really wanted to stop thinking like that with my sponsor, for goodness sake. During that week, I remember that I was in the small kitchenette in the B&B that I was staying in preparing breakfast for both me and him. Yes, we had spent the night together, but going through some paperwork together and talking about business. He then came in wearing only a very tight vest and jogging shorts. He just stayed with me in the kitchen, keeping me company. Only if he knew that his company was a destruction to me. He started asking me about my life in general and how I started the restaurant business, wanting to know how being married was. I told him what he needed to hear and found it enough to share. I couldn't tell him everything about my life and my marriage. Yes, he was my sponsor, but not my friend. So I couldn't tell him everything that is going on between my husband and I. It was going to be over boundaries. Mind you, Tony and I had been arguing a lot lately about why I left without notifying him, and about him being always absent even when I was away. He never called to check up on me and how the business was going. That led to a very heated and biggest argument. My husband and I were slowly drifting apart. Yes, our connection and love would always be there, but we were drifting apart. I felt like he was trying to push me away because even when he is under stress and pressure, he no longer confides in me as his wife. I would sometimes wonder who he confides to if he was shutting me out the way he was doing. It really hurt me having to beg every day for your partner to give you the attention that you need. The more I was spending time with Bernard, the more we got closer. I ended up confiding in him about Tony's behavior and my marital problems because it was really shutting my heart. And it was just evident that I was going through something because I would sometimes zone out when Bernard was speaking to me. I didn't know who to talk to, so Bernard was the only person who was willing to listen to me vent about my marriage. I know I shouldn't have done that, but what I was supposed to do, because I couldn't keep my sadness and heartbreaking moments inside my chest. I was going to burst and a lot would have been destroyed. So Bernard prepared snacks for us, especially marshmallows and hot chocolate, which were my favorite when I was not feeling well or feeling down. I had expanded my time in Dubai. I was still enjoying myself, and I didn't want to be around Tony for a little while. I appreciated the time and ear that Bernard had lent me and made me vent in him. I needed to offload. My chest was too heavy. As I was crying like that, Bernard hugged me and promised to always be there for me when I needed a shoulder to cry on. Since Tony had been so distant and acting the way he was, especially after the argument that we had, he started switching off his phone to a point that he would not be reachable the whole day, maybe until late in the evening. And I knew how much he hated being called late in the evening because he would be in bed sleeping or working. Bernard's hug was actually what I needed. You know, the kind of hug that is warm and welcoming? The one that makes you feel like everything is going to be okay. So as we were still hugging, I found myself kissing him. We kissed and things got out of hand. A kiss escalated. We ended up doing the deed in the lounge. Mind you, that time I had no clue that Tony had bugged my phone's camera to track all my movements and to know what I am doing, with who and when. I had completely forgotten that my husband was that insecure, and that was the reason why he didn't want me to fly to Dubai. Since that indescribable day, Bernard and I continued seeing each other. Sometimes we would get intimate all over the B&B, even on the couches, and it was just fire, while some other time we would go to a nearest hotel to book for the day. We couldn't book for the night because my husband was going to be suspicious when I did not answer my phone whenever he called. We did our thing carefully because if Tony was to find out about us, I knew that I was going to suffer the consequences and I would be left a divorced woman. Bernard was giving it to me so sweetly and gently. He was very explosive. He knew how to explore a woman's body and make her feel foreign and end up speaking in tongues. He knew every spot to touch to make me submit to his commands. Well, he loved gentle, rough, intimate moments. I didn't even know that there was actually gentle, rough type of intimate sessions. I learned a lot from Bernard, even some new positions that someone would think are extreme, but they are very enjoyable and nice. I was not a submissive wife to my husband, but with Bernard, I was submissive without even thinking twice. My husband loved missionary intimacy, while Bernard loved exploring new positions, and I learned a lot. I mean, my own husband was a 1 or 2 rounds type of person, then he would get tired and fall asleep. Bernard, on the other hand, was a dragon. He was spitting fire when it comes to intimacy. He would make you go all night and even wake you in the morning. He would always leave my private area burning and tired. The guy knew his thing, and up until today I complimented him. He is the best. My relationship with Bernard went on and on for like 1 month, well until the day I went back home. He made sure to check up on me and promised to visit me. We were still careful, but Bernard didn't want us to be private. He wanted us to be seen in public as dating people, and that was not what I had wanted. As much as I was enjoying the intimacy and everything that Bernard was offering, but I loved my husband so much. I wouldn't just leave my husband for an intimacy freak like Bernard. He is doing me good and exploring my body the way I had been desiring, but I wouldn't divorce my husband to be with him. He didn't understand that our relationship was an intimate relationship and business and nothing more or less. But the poor guy had caught feelings, and that was not what we had agreed on. It was purely and strictly intimacy. Weeks later, I ended my affair with Bernard. I felt like I had destroyed my marriage and went against my wedding vows. I shouldn't have allowed temptations and desires to control me like that. I should have respected myself and my marriage with Tony. Bernard had started to catch feelings, and it was not looking good because we would sometimes argue about his obsessive behavior. I don't know why he was suddenly obsessed, because we had an agreement of no strings attached, but he decided to attach strings on our thing and the whole thing got crushed. I went back to my marital home. I wished to change the location and buy a new home for Tony and myself, because the house held so many memories. Even the memory of myself being broken and not taken as the loved wife for the first time was in my marital home. I felt like I had disrespected my husband in the worst way possible, and there was no way to undo what I had done. That's how guilty I was feeling. I know I had wanted or craved for Bernard for at least one night, but it shouldn't have escalated like it did. I should have kept everything professional and strictly business, but no. The stupid me just mixed business with pleasure, and guess what happened? I was F***ed. A few days later, Tony was back at home. Well, he was working at home most of the time. The guilt was eating me up like a deadly disease. I had tried to act normal around my husband, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something was wrong. I couldn't bear looking at him and acting like a happy wife while I knew what I had done. Tony, being as nonchalant as ever, didn't seem to notice anything amiss. The guilt and anxiety of my abomination grew with each passing day. So one day I was just chilling at home, going through some documents and preparing for the month-end special menus. Bernard had called and asked for a meeting since he was around the country. Obviously, he is or was my sponsor, so I asked him to come over to my house since I was not feeling too well to be seen in public places. Luckily, he agreed. I didn't know that the feelings that I had thought I had buried when I ended things with Bernard would somehow be out there, you know. The real reason why I had ended things with Bernard was because I was also catching some feelings for him, and it was becoming dangerous. During that beautiful sunny morning, I had woken up craving for some intimacy and I needed my husband. So I asked Bernard to come over to my house. I was alone, so I thought, why not invite Bernard over? When Bernard got inside, I couldn't contain myself, so I just told Bernard that we should just get to business. He started by exploring my body so nicely and smooth as usual. Bernard's touch was always like a drug to me, and I was enjoying it so bad. Things got out of hand. Our quick, intimate moment went to be the longest and sweet one. It wasn't my intention to do what I did, especially at my marital home, but I was in my desired moment, and I was too lazy to be out of the house. So that's why I had called Bernard over. I thought it was going to be one quick round to get my satisfaction, but it ended up being the whole service. As we were still busy, and I was about to reach my Cloud 9 climax, I heard people speaking. I first didn't pay attention to it because the TV was also playing, so I had thought it was TV, only to find out that it was Tony with his friend from work. He looked so spooked and somehow heartbroken, or rather traumatized, for what he had come across. As much as I was not feeling any guilt when my thing with Bernard kept happening, but when I saw Tony's face, I felt ping of guilt and regret. I regretted everything that I had done. It was like I had recently regained my consciousness. At first, I had wished to be told that dreaming or what was happening wasn't true. But it was, and from there and then I knew that I had destroyed my marriage. I don't really know why I had invited Bernard over to my marital home with my husband, but desires drove me to that decision and it cost me a lot. I tried hiding my body from Tony's friend, but it was too late. He had already seen everything, and there was nothing I could have done except for taking the throw that was on the couch and covering myself. Tony became a statue, so at some moments I think he was trying to digest what he had seen. After some time, I asked Bernard if he should go along with Tony's friend. I was glad when they complied with my request and went out. I was left with Tony, mind you. That time I didn't know what to say nor do. My mind went blank and my tongue got dry. I wanted to tell him that it wasn't what he was thinking, but that would be useless because he had caught me red-handed. On another side, I wanted to apologize and tell him that it will never happen again. But what would I be apologizing for? I didn't know that if I was to apologize to Tony, I would be apologizing at the fact that I got caught, or I would be apologizing at the fact that I had went against my own wedding vows of being loyal and faithful, and went outside to destroy that one thing that we had going on, and we had worked so hard to make it where it was. Yes, Tony was the main reason why I had gone outside our marriage to find satisfaction outside, but that didn't mean I should have listened to my desires and jeopardized my marriage, right? 1 month later, things were still not fine between Tony and I, but we continued living together. We didn't even talk about what had taken place. When I tried to apologize or even try to explain to him what had really happened, he would dismiss me and go out to only God knew where. I was regretting ever getting it up with Bernard again because I had closed the Bernard chapter when I started to learn how to focus on my marriage, but on my mini vacation, the guy just showed up and all the desires that I had came back. All I wanted was for Tony to pay attention to me and take me or treat me as his wife, not his roommate. I needed him next to me. I wanted to feel his touch, his kisses and intimate moments. I wanted him to notice me just like the old time when we started dating and even before we got married. I missed him. I missed the spark that we had before we got married and during our first years of being married. I wanted my best friend back, but he wasn't there, and Bernard was there to step in where Tony couldn't provide. During that month, he came back home and told me that he had moved on, and I should find a place to stay because his new person was going to move in with him, so one had to go. I asked who was the person he wanted to bring into our marital home, and he told me that he would introduce me to her later, that day. All I had to do was to cook a nice dinner because she was a special guest. That time I kept thinking about who he would bring into our home and why would he tell me such a thing. My mind was telling that he was doing that to spite me or make me jealous. Sure, I had done him wrong in the worst way possible, but how could he want to introduce his new girlfriend to me while I was still his lawful wife? My heart was torn apart. I found myself going into a very depressing state that I had never thought I would survive. He should have just filed for divorce if he didn't love me anymore instead of hurting me the way he was. I was not sure if I was ready to see his newly found love or a bait to spite me. Later that day, he came back and I got the best shock of my life. He came in with my worst enemy. Imagine my lower grade bully was actually the girl that Tony introduced to me as his new lover. I couldn't believe it, you know. I looked at Patricia with so much hate and rage. I hadn't forgiven nor forgotten the things that she had done to me while we were in senior primary school. I couldn't believe Tony, and to worsen things, He forwarded me all the videos from the very beginning of my affair with Bernard in front of his girl, then told me to check my socials in an hour. Tony introduced her and looked like they were genuinely in love with each other. I couldn't believe that my own husband would actually betray me like that with my enemy's worst part. I didn't know what to say. To say my heart was shuddered would be an understatement. How can a person who claimed to love do something so sinister to you? I couldn't fathom seeing them all touchy-feely in front of me, so I had left them alone in the dining room. Tony came into our bedroom and asked if I felt how sweet the revenge was, and that he wasn't done because that was a start. I couldn't believe the psycho that I had married. I thought he was sane, but no, he was insane. So he used my worst enemy to spite and avenge himself just because he had caught in an act with Bernard. Tony was just pure evil and disgusting. After that hour, he had told me to check my socials, and I checked why he wanted me to be on socials in the evening. When I logged in, all my actions with Bernard were posted there. People even created memes with our videos. It was so embarrassing and degrading. I went back to my grandparents' house, and to say they were disappointed at what I did and how I had destroyed my marriage would be an understatement. But another thing, they got very angry when they learned that my husband had gone out to take my worst enemy to avenge himself. The very same person who I almost lost my life to because of her. Tony had the nerve to take her and introduce her to me. You know, that time I lost a lot, including my investors and sponsors, because even now I'm trying to get other investors, but I'm failing because of those videos. I don't know what to do nor say. Please help me understand what was going on in my marriage. Yes, till today we have not got divorced, but we no longer live together. Another thing I want to do is to save my businesses because slowly they are drowning and going down the drain. What should I do? How do I deal with all of it? I am suffering. I know I am the one who started all this, but I never thought I would find myself in this situation. Please advise me because I am lost in the wild and I need to get out.